last day, but one of your last Zoom classes. Well, I'm done with Zoom after today, I think. What a weird ride this has been. My goal today is to go over the spring 2020 exam from last semester or last year. I hope you all took the time to actually do the exam on Monday. It wasn't required, but I would hope you did. And you came prepared with questions, because this is your chance to ask them. I'm dedicating the entire class period. I've not done this before like this, where I give a full class period to do the exam and a full class period to go over. I've not done that before. We'll see how it works. All right. I want to try something. Zoom has this new feature that lets you arrange people on the screen. Okay. Are you seeing anything different? Do you see this or no? How does this look? Is it creepy?
Yeah, your background's all white now.
No, but do you see a classroom? Any of you? Okay.
No, it just looks like black.
Yeah, you need to update your Zoom app. All right, so this is stupid. Okay, anyway, but the idea is it basically arranges you all in a classroom format. A couple of you are there. Anyway, no, this is stupid. Okay, never mind. Stop immersive view. Okay, so any questions before we get started?
Yes.
Go ahead, Zach.
Can I take number one?
No, that's not how we're going to do this. No, that's not what I meant. Before we get started. It's the last day of class. Come on, man. All right. One note. Bradley, I'll give you a second. I had skipped a couple of the case summaries from the last few classes on leaseholds. If you go back and check the case summary folder, I added a few of those. I added one summary of how leaseholds work, another one on Garner v. Garish. I'm sorry if I'm behind. The end of the semester always crashes much like it does for you, so I fell behind and I apologize. But I added a couple over the weekend. I'll try to add a few more by the end of this week. Bradley, go ahead. Bradley, I think you're off camera and off mute. Oh, are you in the classroom? Oh, that's why. Okay, gotcha. Okay, good.
Yeah, sorry. I don't remember if you talked about this or not. Are you going to be up until the day of the final? Are you going to be available for us to either meet with you?
No, that's not what I said. I said there's a cutoff.
Okay.
Did I told the other class? I told this class?
You may have. I just don't remember offhand.
So let me just check my calendar. I know I told the other section, and I can't remember if I told you. May 4th at 5 p.m. That's your cutoff for questions. Okay? Which is 2 days for the exam. And the reason why I impose a cutoff is not because I'm lazy. I find that the questions that get close to the exam are very bad and usually born out of panic and fear and not actual lack of knowledge. And people are starting to psych themselves out. Or some of the questions are so complicated, would require reteaching the entire course. And it's almost like, just relax. So I impose the cutoff. It makes things a lot simpler for me, at least. And it avoids you having to panic and try to meet with me. One semester, I actually had students. I used to leave, not that you've ever seen it, but I have an office with my business cards on the desk that has my cell phone number on it. And one of the students took my card. I didn't think much of it. And they had emailed me the morning of the exam a question. I didn't respond right away. And they started calling, or did they text me? I can't remember. I was annoyed either way. And I was like, no, you don't do that. So May the 4th be with you at 5 p.m. Sorry, a couple of you smiled. All right, let's walk through the May 2020 exam. And just, you may have figured this out already, but May 2020 was the first pandemic semester. Now we've had 3, I suppose. It was a very different place. The university adopted a pass-fail grading scheme, which I vigorously opposed, but I was outvoted. The upshot was that no one cared about the final exam, and everyone blew it off. The exams were the worst I ever had, so I didn't even bother picking an A+ because there was no one worthy of an A+. The exams were crap. So that's why you don't have an A+ exam. I have a memo, which I will read and go over, but there's no A+. Also, there's only one question. I cut the exam length basically in half. The reason why is people were taking exams at home, and there was concerns that they wouldn't be able to focus and people would be distracted. And I don't know. I felt almost guilty doing it, but I said, fine, I'll cut the exam in half. They're not going to try anyway. And it's not going to count anyway. So I don't want to waste my time grading twice as much as I had to. It was a weird semester. The current students who were 1Ls last year have this hole on their resume, on their transcript with no grades. And just it's burning them in ways that were hard to foresee. I think one of the most harmful ways was students who are at the bottom of the class who probably shouldn't have continued to the second year were allowed to continue. And they didn't realize until the third semester and they flunked out. And there were a lot of students who burned a third semester of law school they probably shouldn't have. So that was a mistake. The first year of law school is a good filtering device because it happens every year that people don't make the cut and they move on to other things in their lives and they realize it's probably for the best. I don't say that to scare anyone, but it's a fact of life that there are some people who are my roster now who will not be here in the fall. It's just a matter of statistics. So take the next, 3-4 weeks really seriously. And if it doesn't pan out, I'm happy to come talk to you, talk to someone else, but you have to make tough decisions. We're all adults here. We have to be, candid. Even this semester, a couple of people who started this semester didn't finish by choice. They left voluntarily. They realized it wasn't for them. And that's a decision we all make. All right, so let's take a look at this exam. Again, this is atypical. Usually for the final, there are 2 questions. There's only 1 question. There are 2 questions. Each question has a 1,000-word limit. 1,000 per question. Not 1,000 total. Not 2,000 words for the first one. 1,000 total. You should very seriously consider limiting yourself by time. If you have 3 hours for 2 questions, that means you should have 90 minutes per question. And if you're at the 90-minute mark and you've not finished question number 1, stop and go to the next one. Don't spend 2 hours in the first part and then run out of time for part 2. It's a very bad idea to do that. Yes, Tyler, go ahead.
When you say question, you mean
part 1. Part 1, part 2. Yes.
Got it.
Okay. Right. I'll get to the individual questions, but part 1 and part 2. At 90 minutes, you should be moving on up to the next one, because if you're not going to finish. And one of the reasons why I gave you the sample exam in class yesterday or on Monday was so you would feel what 90 minutes felt like, how much you can get done in about an hour and a half. If you can't finish, you're in trouble. Okay? All right. There's a word count feature in ExamSoft. It's not obvious, but it's there. There's a little character count where it counts how many letters you have. Next to the character count, there's a little document, a little rectangle icon, a little page, right? If you click that, a word count pops up. If you don't understand my instructions, that's fine. Do a sample test in ExamSoft between now and the end of the year, which is basically now. But do one really soon, and you'll see what it is. Don't walk into the exam not knowing how to follow the instructions for the exam word count. Open book, whatever you want. Unfortunately, it has to be printed. I know this rule's stupid. I wish I could let you just use your iPads and use your notebooks, but it just makes cheating too easy. There's no way to restrict this. Unfortunately, I have to restrict you to paper. Kill trees, I'm sorry. Print double-sided if it makes you feel better. But unfortunately, I have to have everything on paper. If I were to allow tablets and laptops for notes, I would have to restructure the exam entirely. And it would not be pretty because it would make it far too easy to cheat. Okay. Now you've all used the exam soft online. I don't enable the recording and the AI stuff. I have a mixed relationship with it. I think it works quite well. In fact, the software is much better at detecting cheating than in-person proctors. In-person proctors are terrible. They don't catch anything. They miss everything. They fall asleep. It's really bad. But my exam is written that's very hard to cheat. The exam questions are very hard. You're not going to find the answer in a horn book. And if you start texting your friend to get answers, you're going to waste time. And I'm going to know because the answers will be it's very similar. One year, there were two students who had very similar exams, and I started freaking out. And then I figured out they had actually studied in advance and pre-written package answers, right? They basically pre-wrote answers for certain topics, like on hunting, and they just copied from their outlines. Like, okay, that's why they were similar. But I realized very quickly that the answers were very similar, and I investigated and then figured it was fine. So don't test me. I'll figure it out. With multiple choice, I would definitely use the cheating software, but for essay, doesn't do anything. All right. Questions so far? All right. So the exam, yeah, Emily, go ahead, please.
Hi, my question is, if there's a repeated theme in a fact pattern, I asked another professor this too. If there's a repeated theme in a fact pattern, is it okay for us to say, this principle as described above, or do we have to
Let me go over the exam. Maybe the question will become more obvious in a few minutes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So the exam begins with instructions, which may sound obvious, but so many students don't read the damn instructions. Every year, they just skip over them and they read them quickly. This is a very important piece of information. The reason why this information is important is it tells you what kind of jurisdiction you're in, which is extremely important. Are you in a common law jurisdiction? Are you in a modern jurisdiction? Are you in a community property state? Are you in a common law property state? Are you in Texas? Are you in California? Are you in New Jersey? Right. By this point in the semester, those things should be ringing bells. Oh, if you're in New Jersey, you do this rule. If you're in California, you do this rule. And if you're in Texas, you do this rule. And if you're in a community property state, you do this rule. If you don't know the differences by now, you're in trouble. We've been highlighting those throughout the semester. So in this jurisdiction, it applies common law property rules. And with respect to marital property, community property system. And just look how easy it is to get tricked up. Like, oh, common law. That means you're applying like New York common law marital property. No, you have to read the entire sentence. A lot of people screwed this one up last year. The exams were terrible last year, so it's not fair for me to criticize them because I didn't try. But a lot of people missed that, and they just talk about elective shares in a community property state, and you can't do that. Last year was just a disaster. All right. I think every Property 1 exam I've ever written had a hunting question, 100%. I've always had some sort of hunting question, but I always make it in a very confusing, convoluted fact pattern. It's always messy, and I find different ways of doing this. I always think I'm going to run out of ways of asking about hunting, but then I never do. I always think of a new way to ask about it. So it involves hunting. It's going to involve water. It might involve minerals or gas or oil, right? There's some sort of fugitive question, something. When you're doing the hunting questions, please do not discuss the lost property cases. About 10 of you will do it. I don't know how many times I warn you, you're going to do it anyway. When you're doing a hunting question, don't talk about the lost property cases. When you're doing a lost property case, don't talk about the hunting cases. You'll do it. I'm warning you, but you'll do it anyway. The hunting cases are about fugitive resources, things that move on their own, right? Like oil and water and animals. The lost property stuff is about inanimate objects, things that don't move on their own. They don't have natural liberty. So just be very careful. This fact pattern is based in the movie Moana. I remember I was stuck at home like everyone else was thinking, watching the entire Disney Plus catalog last fall or last spring, and this is what I do with my break. So we learn Moana. It's a movie about a princess, as they always are, and they go on missions, and the rest. Best one ever, James? Really? Best? Oh, maybe for another. Best is very hard. There are so many Disney movies. Anyway, Moana lives on the island of Staten. I'm from Staten Island, which is not really in Polynesia. It's in New York, but close enough. A nation located in the Pacific Ocean. Very often my questions are at island nations for reasons that will become clear. Okay, Moana has magical powers and control the flow of water. Again, watch the movie if you want to see it. Staten Island was discovered long ago by Tua. We learned that Moana is Tua's daughter. When Tua first arrived, the land was uninhabited. So at this point, bells should be flashing in your head. Okay, discovery doctrine, right? Johnson versus McIntosh. Right? We have an uninhabited land, and there's no need for conquest because it was uninhabited. There were no people there. Okay. The island is surrounded by water, salt water, which has fish, but you can't drink salt water. Staten Island has only one source of drinkable fresh water, and it's a stream empties into the ocean. Okay. So now we get to the hunt. He walks to the shore. He throws 5 spears into the ocean to catch fish. We learn that the first 4 spears miss, but the 5th spear punctures the fish's tail. And that's a very, I framed the question very deliberately. Is throwing a spear at the animal's tail that just sort of grazes the tail enough to capture the animal, or what we call mancupate, right? Under Pearson v. Post. We don't know if the fish died. Maybe it swam away. Was it deprived of its natural liberty? There's also the issue of rationing solely, right? If Tua, in fact, owns the island, does he own the water around it? We don't have an answer to that question. I don't know the answer to the questions, but you need to be creative and think of the different cases and how they can extend to this fact pattern. I'd accept either answer. It does apply or doesn't apply. I actually don't care. I'm more interested in seeing that you're recognizing the various issues. Keeble, the duck case, would be relevant. Maybe talk about Genby Rich. Is there any hunting customs on point? Probably not. Okay. Also, Tua only hit 1 fish. Does that give him the right to have all the fishes? All the fish in the sea. Fish? No. Fish. Singular fish, right? Okay. We learn that Moana, a vegetarian, tells her father to stop throwing the spears to the fish, and he refuses. Okay. Is that a form of like tortious interference, like in Keeble, right? Where the neighbors interfering with the duck hunt, right? Most people miss that one, but those facts when they're quite deliberately. Then Moana uses her powers to empty the fresh water stream to the ocean. This plan backfires. She hopes the rush of water will knock over her father and prevent him from throwing spears. Doesn't work. Fish can't live in fresh water, and they all die. Right? So the vegetarian tries to save the fish, and she ends up killing them. But is that capture? Right? Did that act? I'm not just giving you this fact to sort of joke around. Zach, we'll get to you when I'm done in a minute. I promise. When I'm done with the question. Right? Did the freshwater capture them? Right? You usually think of a tool like a net or a spear, but the freshwater actually suffocated the fish. It was a weapon. And Moana picked up the fish and gave it a proper burial because they're all floating to the surface. She didn't intend to kill them, but did Moana capture the fish? Also, keep in mind that Moana emptied out the stream, so now the people have no fresh water. So they're going to, have thirst. All right. So here comes to the question, right? We have this fact pattern. We have the question. Tua sues Moana with 2 claims. First, he seeks compensation for the value of the fish he picked up from the water. And second, he argues that she violated the rights of the freshwater stream, which you might probably go with the Western rule. I think is more appropriate here because it's on a deserted island with limited water. And I think Tua probably acquired the stream through first in time because he got there first. Okay. So lots of things to talk about. All right. I think by right after there's Zach first, and then I'll be happy to take other hands. Zach, go ahead.
I have a few questions, but I'll limit.
I just want, by the way, I don't want questions in the chat. If you have a question, just raise your hand. I'm not doing chat questions today. So go ahead. Yes, Zach, go ahead.
On the point where you said Moana telling him to stop, is that torturous interference? We didn't cover torturous interference in here.
We did, Zach. We did. Please stop telling us we didn't cover. Right? Please. This is the third time I've done this. We did the Keeble case, where the guy was blasting a gun, interfering with his neighbor's trade.
Right. And now that you say it's torturous, I recognize that as torturous interference.
Thank you.
How do we approach that part though?
Exactly as the case says. Exactly as the case says. Keeble held that you can't interfere with your neighbor's trade. It's interfering with their rights. There. Okay.
And her telling him would be enough.
She told him, and then she blasted the water.
Okay, so it's the blasting of the water.
Yes. Okay, thanks. Angelina, go ahead.
Okay, so I heard you mention the Keeble case and how it would attach to it. So even though that was something that I ran through in my mind and I was typing it, I was gonna say I think I used more of like the rational solely doctrine and
That's
the
fine.
discovery doctrine to claim all that. So I was wondering, do we have to should we just pick something and then move on? Like you're not expecting us to cover it in its entirety, meaning that
Right.
that might have been too wordy to do all that.
Yeah, it's a fair question. It's a fair question, Angelina. Let me answer it this way. You know, in a given question, I might have 5 issues in mind. No student will get all 5. Even the A+ answer won't get all 5. They maybe they'll get 4 of them, right? And maybe the A answer gets 3 of them, and maybe a B answer gets 2 of them, and maybe a C answer gets 1 of them. So the short answer is you don't have to talk about all of them, but somehow the top papers manage to figure to talk about most of them. And that's just. But if you can get 3 out of those 5 issues, you're probably on track for a good score. But if you look at sort of the A+ answers from years past, you'll see how they do so very efficiently. A question I always get, and I'll just globally answer this. How do I write so much in such a short span? It can't be done, and it can, right? I can share the A+ answers. They do it. Writing concisely is a skill. It's an art. It's something that law students don't always learn. But it's something that's very important because any judge, any partner you work with will give you word limits, page limits. Don't care what court you're in, you have page limits. And learning to make as many points as you can well in a short period is a very important skill for you to learn, right? If you don't raise a point in some court brief, it's waived, right? You lose it. So, I mean, the question Angelina asks is a fair question, right? How do you write a brief making all of your important points well in a short period of time? That's a very useful skill to have, which is one of the reasons why I impose word limits even upon one else. Why do I have to do this, Josh? Well, this is the rest of your life. If you have 1,000 pages, you can make the best brief in the world, but you probably have 15 pages. Okay. To answer your question, Angelina?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Freddie, go ahead.
For the issues that we spot that may not have a answer to it, are you okay with us?
I'm sorry, just you mean not a single right answer? I mean, you can go either way. Is that what you mean?
Like earlier, I forgot exactly which one you said.
Yeah.
I don't know which. Right. If it was a question like that, could we just frame, let you know that we see the issue and frame it as a question and not answer it?
What I would, yeah. So I got your question. So there are some questions where I write a very hard fact pattern where, I'll be honest, I can go either way, right? It can go to the plaintiff or the defendant. I don't know which one's a better one. I think what you could say is, that the answer isn't clear under the law. But I would prefer if you say, but I think all things considered, on balance, it goes to the plaintiff or it goes to the defendant for reason X. And that's the why. I made this point in class a number of times. Students are going to tell me the what the rule is, but the why is the hard part. So I would encourage you to say that it's not entirely clear, but for reasons X, Y, and Z, the plaintiff should prevail. Right? I mean, in fact, if you go back to the question asks specifically, how should the court resolve the first claim? Right? A judge can't write an opinion saying, I don't know. They got to pick something. Think of like the Splunky Explorers, right? They can't just decide, no, I'm not going to decide. They got to do something. Oh, I got it. Natasha, I'll get you in a second. Last week, there was a case at the Supreme Court, which involved a juvenile who was sentenced to life without parole. Life, he would spend the rest of his life in prison. And the majority rules that sentence was valid. But at the end of the opinion, Justice Kavanaugh wrote that he basically said, well, but the governor can pardon the defendant. I was like, whoa, that's Splunkian, right? Who actually writes that? And then we have Brett Kavanaugh, who did it. All right, Freddie, to answer your question?
It did, thank you.
Okay, Natasha, go ahead.
So kind of answering for the defendant or the plaintiff, I split the answer for the fish question that for the one that Tua was able to puncture.
Right, that's good.
The fish, is that okay?
Yeah, that's actually very, very sharp. I think a few people did that last year. Because I think they're definitely, the fish he punctured, he has a much stronger claim to than the rest of the fish. We don't know from the facts if he actually killed the fish. That's enough to deprive it of its natural liberty, but there's a puncture in that. That's good enough to, and I use the word puncture very deliberately. So, I mean, a puncture seems to be more like than just like it's got, just sort of grazed, but that's good. Okay, Onya, go ahead.
I had a question on whether Pope v. Hayashi would have applied to the first question. I was kind of using qualified possession in the fact that, well, Moana kind of got control with the fish being dead at the end, and then the fact that Tua put in the effort with the trying to hunt them with the spears. And when I read your memo, that wasn't one of the cases, and I did find like another issue that you had.
That's creative.
But I'm just wondering, like, creative, I guess, other options.
Yeah, no, that's creative. So it's like, the baseball was, hit into the stands and the guy grabbed and he got knocked over and sort of like that. Is that what you had in mind?
Yeah, because I was thinking it's the same thing, like tortious interference in a sense.
Good, yeah.
With the baseball.
Yeah. In fact, the Keeble case has some similarities to the Popov case because you have someone interfering with someone else's ability to actually possess the ball. I think it's a creative approach. Yeah, that's good. My memo is not perfect, and let me just make answer Onya's question a little more carefully. Every year when I write the exam, I might have, say, 4 or 5 issues in mind, and then a student comes up with a 6th issue, like, whoa, I didn't see that. And I'll sometimes revise my memo and say, a student came up with this issue, it was very creative. May not be right, but it was like, wow, that's creative. That's really smart. I think, when you write a very complex fact pattern with 70 very smart law students, they're going to come up with stuff that I didn't see, and I'm happy to reward that. It's just, I can't foresee everything, but I'm happy when that happens. So good job. Yes, Brian, go ahead.
Okay, so I thought the Keeble case didn't apply here, when the Pearson v. Post case applied more because he owned the island, but the fish, does he own the ocean surrounding it?
Well, I raised that issue. I don't know how ration solely doctrine would apply here. I put that in the memo. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's what I said. So I said like Pearson v. Post, like the whole depriving natural liberty of the animal is more applicable, and he didn't. So I said,
yeah, but there are many ways to approach it. But I wrote in the memo that. Right? Did you read the memo?
No, not yet.
Okay, we should do that.
Okay.
Rationing solely is tricky because it's not on the land; it's in the water, and question whether the rationing solely doctrine apply to water surrounding the island. Probably not, but you can maybe make the argument. I don't know. Okay. All right. Other questions? Number 1. Going once. Going twice. Going 3 times. Yes, Angelina, go ahead. Actually, yeah, go ahead. You got it under the gun. Go ahead.
Okay, so I noticed that in the memo, I believe that you had talked about the fact that the Western rule you felt would apply more in this situation. No, the Eastern rule, the one wherever it's scarce.
Right. Yeah.
And I guess, like, to me, there weren't enough facts for me to assume that they were very scarce. So
It said there's only one source of drinking water. That's the only source. That's
Right,
pretty
but
good
I didn't
facts.
oh, okay. I guess I didn't know how big the island was, and it would depend on the people and stuff. I don't know.
But I said in the facts the stream is empty. The people have no access to fresh water.
Mhm.
So you have to be reasonable here. Those facts are pretty good to tell you Eastern rule.
Oh, okay.
I mean Western rule.
It was just one. Okay.
I said there's only one stream, and when that stream was empty, they had no water. They're going to die of thirst. That's pretty good evidence.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you.
Don't fight the fact pattern. I put stuff there very carefully. All right, I'm going to go on to number 2. All right. So number 1 was a hunting question. Number 2 is a lost item, inanimate object question. All right. So one day, Rocky. So the Rocky is basically the character. What's his face? A Maori from the movie, voiced by Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. But I don't like having 2 characters with the same initial because M and M will just confuse you, and so I had to change the name to R. I think about these things. So people will sometimes write M and then confuse them. Everyone has one letter. So one day, Rocky visits Staten Island. The previous week, he had found a fishhook floating in the sea. All right. So we hadn't done a case exactly like this when you find an object floating at the sea. Is it lost property? Is it abandoned property? Maybe a ship sank, right? We don't know where it came from. It was just floating in the sea, but he found it. Okay. Next, we learn that Rocky lays down on the shore, and he puts his fishhook on the banks of the stream. And then, flashback to question 1, all the water rushes out of the stream and spills into the ocean. And then the hook washes into the ocean. And we know that Moana used her powers to force the water out. So did Moana steal his hook? Did she use her powers as a trespass of some sort? Okay, so now when the hook's in the sea, we learn that a giant whale swallows a fishhook. If you know the biblical story of Jonah and the whale, that's what was on my mind. Also, I guess Pinocchio had the same theme. Tua goes on to hunt the whale, and he shoots with a bomb lance. Right? They should be thinking of Genvi Rich, and is the bomb lance enough to kill the whale? Then the whale washes on shore. Moana finds the carcass again, and she carves it up. And she finds a fish hook inside the carcass. And this complicates things because when you capture a whale, you also capture what's inside of it. Well, you would capture the blubber, right? The actual fat of the whale you make the oil out of. What about a hook inside the carcass? Rocky demands the Moana return the hook. She refuses. Tua now says, wait a minute, it's actually my hook. He found it buried in the sand on the beach, but he lost it the prior month. So maybe it went out to sea. So maybe Rocky wasn't the first. You have priority. First you have Tua, then you have Rocky, then you have Moana. So Tua demands return, and then Moana files suit to quiet title for the hook. And again, the question is, how should the court resolve it? You got to pick someone, right? In a case with 3 people asserting a claim to an item, you got to pick someone, Moana, Tua, or Rocky. Things you can talk about, right? South Staffordshire Water versus Sharman, Yules versus Briggs Gas. Something's buried in the sand. Who's it belong to? Does it belong to the owner of the island? Who's the owner of the island? Well, we know that's Tua from the Discovery Doctrine, Part 1. Yes, you need to remember what came before to answer number 2. What about finding the fishhook in the sea? Is it Armory versus Delamery, first in time? But still, he's inferior to Tua. Don't talk about Pearson v. Post. That's not relevant. When Rocky put the hook in the island on the sand, did he abandon it? Did he lose it? Did he mislay it? Did he just put it down to rest? Did Moana steal the hook? Right? When Moana found the whale on the island, did she have the right to it? Or under her custom, did it belong to the hunter? All right. Lots of things you can talk about here. Lots of different directions you can go in. All right. I see hands. I see Tyler. Go ahead.
I ended up deleting this for various reasons, but would it have been, relevant at all to talk about whether or not Tua's claim is actually worth anything? Because from the way it's told, we view that Rocky found the fish hook objectively, whereas it's phrased, Tua's claiming that he found it. So
Oh, I see what you're saying. Treat this like a motion to dismiss. Assume the facts are pleaded as true, right? I know what you're saying, and I'm hesitant slightly because there might be a fact pattern where there's obvious fraud involved, and I'll usually make that clear whether someone's lying. But if there's a fact, just presume it's as told. I don't give you nearly enough to figure out if the facts given are not true. There's just no way to do that in an exam. So unless there's some evidence of fraud that someone's lying, assume the facts pleaded are true. I think that might just be a fair way of approaching the exam. But it's a good question.
Thank you.
Okay, Natasha, go ahead.
The South Staffordshire water case, I called that the prior possession doctrine, but then I couldn't actually find that anywhere else. So did I just make that up?
Prior possession. Did we say that in class? I don't remember.
That's why I couldn't actually find it anywhere, so I'm assuming it's wrong. So I would just use the case.
Well, you need the case name anyway. Let me check my notes. I don't remember if I called it that. That's entire. Forget the name of the doctrine. Case names are always better. Prior possession doctrine. Ever see that class? When your class is transcribed, it's always tricky. I don't have the phrase in my notes, but it does exist. I've used it before. You know what? It's not on my notes, but maybe I said it because it's used elsewhere. So, if I said it, I said it. Funny, I just searched my Google Drive for prior possession doctrine, and none of my notes turned up, but my property outline when I was in law school turned up. So who knows? Google Drive finds everything. I took property many years ago. Yeah, Derek, go ahead. Right. So I think that's part of the answer, right? If in fact Tua discovered it, then arguably he would have ownership over all the property that's attached to it, that's actually buried in it. I think you can make that argument. What else? Marissa, go ahead.
Did you make an argument for tortious interference for by Moana because it could be said that Tua killed the whale?
Yeah, I think you could do that under Keeble. I think that would work also. The only trick is, and this just you have to be careful of, Keeble is about an animal, right? Whereas here you have an inanimate object. So just make sure if you're citing Keeble, it's for interfering with the trade rather than for the actually the property right of the item, the hook, right? Don't say the fish hook's like a duck, right? That wouldn't work. But for the interference element, I think that would work.
Thank you.
Okay, Onya, go ahead.
So to piggyback off of Marissa's question, so in regards to separating the cases, I knew that we have to talk about the whale separately and the fish hook separately, but then in regards to the claim of the fish hook, was it sufficient to say because it was inside the whale that there was claim to the fish hook or whoever killed it at that point?
Well, I think that's a plausible answer, but I don't know if that's clear. I mean, you'd have to develop it more. Like you have to say, why is the, there are two lines of cases, right? There's one line of case saying, when you capture an animal, you capture its fur, for example, right? In Pearson, right? You capture the skin. But does that mean you capture the guts of the animal? And there's a second line of cases saying that if you have something buried in the sand or buried in the soil, it's yours. Does that mean if it's buried inside of an animal you have? Right? I wrote this question very deliberately. You can go two of those paths, and I don't know what the better answer is, but those are the paths you can go down.
Okay, and then in regards to the whale, I also thought about labor theory with Moana purchasing the whale.
Right.
So would that be applicable in like helping that analysis?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Always feel free to bring in John Locke. It's always fair game. Yeah. This question is hard because it merged an animal with an inanimate object. It sort of did what I told you not to do, which is why I did it. I wrote this question very deliberately to sort of combine two different elements. I have fun writing these exams. I know you hate taking them, but I put a lot of thought and care into writing them because I want to see the best students, see them separate themselves, and it makes me happy when students pick up on those little nuances because like, oh wow, I put that in there and they noticed. Good job. All right, what else? Going once, going twice, 3 times. I'll move on. All right, number 3 is a lot shorter, but it's not easier. This is the sort of future interest question from hell. I always have at least one of these in the exam, sometimes 2. Give yourself like 20 minutes for these questions. Don't rush it. Take it slow. Read it like 100, not 100 times, but read it maybe 4 or 5 times. Really read it carefully. Take notes in your margin. I mean, take your time with these ones because oh sure, it's only 4 or 5 lines, but man, it's a doozy. All right, so I'll read it. Moana, Rocky, and Tua travel to Long Island, which, by the way, is not actually an island. Do you know that Long Island is actually a peninsula? Because Brooklyn and Long Island are in the same body of land, which is a peninsula. There you go. Moana, Rocky, and Tua travel to the island of Long in Polynesia. On Long Island, Moana purchases Blackacre. Okay, we got a Blackacre question. And then she writes the following conveyance. Blackacre from Moana to Rocky, comma. But if Rocky uses Blackacre for residential purposes, comma, to Tua's sons for their lives, comma, so long as Blackacre is used for commercial purposes, period. All right. And then we learn that at the time of this conveyance, Tua has 1 son. And the question asks you to assess the present and future interest of Blackacre, which means you're going to need to list for each person what interests they have that are present and what interests they have that are future. Right? Don't forget to answer the question. Now, just let me give some broad guidance. Students often get this question wrong, and that's not the end of the world. These are very hard, and even if you get it like mostly right, you can get most credit. I don't know if anyone actually got this one right all the way. Maybe one person did last year. I don't remember, but it was close because I think that person made some other stupid little mistake. But most people don't get the entire question right, and you don't have to. You can get most credit by getting some of the basic things right. All right, so let's start one line at a time. Blackacre from Moana to Rocky, comma. But if Blackacre but if Rocky uses Blackacre for residential purposes to Tua sons for their lives, Moana gave Rocky a fee simple subject to an executory interest. Now, you may be tempted to say that Rocky has a fee simple subject to condition subsequent. Words but if are there, right? That's my first trick, which sweeps away maybe 20% of the class just off the bat. They just get that wrong. But in this case, we have to look at the future interest. It's not a right of entry in the grantor Moana. Instead, the future interest goes to a third party, who's Tua's sons. In order to figure out the present interest, you need to know the future interest. So therefore, we have for Rocky a fee simple subject to an executory interest, which is followed by a future executory interest. Now, how do we characterize future interest? This one's hard, right? Tua's sons, and there's only one at this present moment, have a shifting executory interest. Why is it shifting? It's shifting because it can cut short the interest of a grantee third party, who is Rocky, right? Tua's sons can cut short Rocky's fee simple subject to executory interest. All right. So the sons have a shifting executory interest, but it's not in fee simple. Rather, their shifting executory interest is measured in their lives. What does that mean? It's what's called a joint life estate, which we covered. And the interest lasts the duration of the longest living son, whoever that happens to be. We don't even know who that is. There's only one son now. If there's only one son, then it's just a life estate for him. But it's a shifting executory interest in joint life estate. Many students wrote that they have a vested remainder subject to open, but that can't be right. A remainder can only follow a natural termination of a life estate. Here, there's an executory interest. You can't have a remainder following executory interest. So again, to figure out the future interest, you need to know the present interest. Okay. A lot of students saw the word so long as, I thought, oh, fee simple determinable, right? But there's no fee simple of any kind. They have a life estate, right? There's no reference to a possibly reverter, which will go back to the grantor. All right, but we're not done quite yet. What happens if at least one son is alive when Rocky uses Blackacre for residential purposes? The son would keep it for his life. But then, if the son uses the land for non-commercial purposes, he loses it. All right. So again, what happens if the son uses the land for non-commercial purposes? Unclear. I think the best answer is Moana gets it. I think Moana would cut short the interest of the sons. And here again, Moana would have a shifting executory interest. Right? So the sons have a shifting executory interest in joint life estate that's subject to Moana's shifting executory interest. People may think that Moana has a springing interest because she's the grantor, but here she's cutting short the interest of a third party. All right. Last one. What happens if there are no sons alive when Rock uses Blackacre for residential purposes? I think it goes back to Moana. It's the only answer that makes sense. Is it a reversion? I don't think that's the right answer because there's not a natural condition. It doesn't happen after death. It happens after something happening. It goes back to Moana after everyone dies. It's a condition. Okay. Her interest is hard to characterize. And when in doubt, when I'm not sure, it's a shifting executory interest. That's usually how I characterize it. So let me summarize and let me just share the memo for a second, just so you can see the answer and put these in your notes. Oops, I did the wrong one. I'm sorry. I think I would know after 3 semesters of Zoom how to do a screen share. Okay. So I think this is the best I can come up with. Again, I wrote the question. I think I would know, but I don't even know sometimes. But this is the best I can come up with. Rocky had a fee simple subject to Tua's sons shifting executory interest in joint life estate, subject to Moana's shifting executory interest in fee simple. And the sons had a shifting executory interest in joint life estate, subject to Moana's shifting executory interest in fee simple. And Moana had a shifting executory interest in fee simple of Tua's sons shifting executory interest in joint life estate. Lord help us all. I think that's the best answer. What's important there is you put people's names. It's not just subject to a shifting executory interest. It's whose. It's Tua's sons. It's Moana's, right? But for the exam, you need to do more than this. You can't just put these, 3 or 4 lines here, right? You need to explain why. The why is the most important part. You need to give an explanation of why you reached the answer you gave. And if you get something even remotely close to this, you'll probably get almost full credit. No one got 100 on this question. I think no one got a 10. I don't think it never happens. Not last year, at least. Okay. Questions. Okay, the hands are flying. All right, let's see who we got. Angelina, I think, is first. Then we have Nicole. Then we have Jessica. Then we have Derek. All right, Angelina, go ahead.
Okay, so I noticed that in your memo you were talking about different ways that it could go about depending on if you had sons, more sons or not, and how that would kind of change what the interest would be. So for that, would you like us to explain every option or just pick one once again and go with it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think last year anyone even got that far because they sort of got trapped. I think probably the easiest way to answer is if there's one son live, assume there's only going to be one son and go with that. If you want to say, but if the son dies, you can do that as well. But I think at least for a starting point, I would just go based on what the facts are. I'll always tell you if there's a class of, say, sons or children, are there any actually alive now? You need to know that. Because if you don't know that, then the question turns very different.
Right. So we don't have to explore all of those avenues that may end
No.
up to- Okay.
Yeah, look,
So-
I mean this sincerely. If you can get most of this, you can get like a 9 or a 10. Just I write these questions to be so hard that you really have to work your way through it. I want you to show your work, because when you show your work, I know, okay, they got tripped up here, but they understood the general concept. If you just list 1, 2, 3, I don't know how you got it, and I can't get full credit. Okay. Thank you, Angelina. Nicole, go ahead.
I was gonna ask, do you think it's worth it at all for us? Like, would you like us to do like a summary like this on the bottom, or do you think it's not worth our time if we're?
Well, I mean, you could do a summary at the bottom or along the way. It doesn't really matter, but this sort of very clear sentence is helpful because it tells me if you know the answer or not. I don't really care where you put it, but when you put these sort of clear sentences, I need a why to explain how you got there. Right? It's very often a student has like this sort of meandering answer, and I don't even know what their interests are. It's like, well, there's a shifting executory interest, and like, but who has it? And then I like the easier you make it for me to understand what your answer is, the more credit you get. If I have to start digging and sort of uncovering what you wrote, it's not for your benefit.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Jessica, go ahead.
Okay, so I just had a question about the son part. I put a little line in there, like if there's only one son at the time when Rocky messes up, then I don't know if it's correct to say this, but I said he has a shifting executory interest subject to divestment if there are more sons born. Can I like?
No, you're thinking of a vest remainder subject to divestment. I don't think you have a shifting executory interest subject to divestment. That's not a thing.
Okay. And then, so if there's not any sons born, when Rocky dies, then you said the best answer would be that Moana gets it back. So then could you make an argument that she has a springing executory interest?
No, because she's not the grant, because springing is only when the grantor's interest cut short, and that's not what happened here.
Okay.
Moana is the grantor. Moana's interest is not getting cut short. It's cutting short Rocky's or two of his sons, so it's shifting. Do you understand that point?
Yeah, I was just if like when Rocky doesn't use it for the residential purpose and there's no sons left, then or there's no sons
But still, you're cutting short the grantee's interest. That's the definition of shifting. You're not cutting short the grantor's interest. Moana is the grantor. The only way you have a springy interest is if Moana's interest is cut short here, which is not the case.
Okay, thank you.
And just I told you this in class. If you're not sure, just guess shifting. Springs are very rare. Like unless I have like a funeral question, it's probably shifting. Okay. Yeah, Derek, go ahead, sir. Yeah, that's right. You really want to say reversion here, but it's not natural. There has to be a condition about the residential versus business use, right? So it can't work. Yeah, good question. All right, Marissa, go ahead.
Okay, I think you kind of addressed this earlier, but I got really confused as to why it was not a fee simple determinable.
What's the future interest that follows a fee simple determinable?
Isn't it a right of reverter?
No, doubly wrong. There's no such thing as a right of reverter. The future interest that follows a fee simple determinable is a possibility of reverter. Right? That goes back to the grantor. Here, the future interest goes to a third party. It cannot be a possibility reverter. Therefore, it cannot be a fee simple determinable. Right? If you don't understand that, go back and rewatch the last couple lectures from that topic. It's a very important word. The word "so long as" doesn't always mean fee simple determinable. It's a trick. I trick people on this every year. It's not even a trick. I'm warning you. I'm telling you. This is why I tell you cheating won't help, because I'm basically telling you how to do the exam. Right? I'm telling you what I'm going to do, and it still won't matter because people still walk into it. All right. Anything else? Number 3. Going once. Going twice. All right, move on. And by the way, this is your chance for questions. Don't think you can, if you don't answer the question now, this is your shot. I mean, I'm giving you all the time in the world, but like this is your shot to ask questions. I don't want to get questions in a week saying, oh, this and that. This is your shot. I'm giving a 2 full class periods on this exam, which was perhaps more than I should have given, but we'll see. All right, question number 4. Okay, on Long Island, Rocky and Tua own Whiteacre as tenants in common. Moana and Rocky get engaged. They're engaged. They're in love, but they're not married yet. So be very careful, right? What's the thing? It don't mean a thing if you ain't got that ring, right? Or if you like it, better put a ring on it, right? They're not they're not married yet, so there's no marital property. I can't tell you how angry I was last semester, where like dozens of students, missed that sentence that they were only engaged. And they wrote this elaborate answer about joint quasi-marital property, and it was all wrong. They weren't married yet. Like, I was actually angry that people didn't read the question carefully enough. And anyway, so this was annoying. They're just engaged. There's even an example, I think, in the book, which we went over in class, of what happens if they're only engaged. We had that in the case book. I'm sorry, Derek. Well, it happened, and that's what I'm saying. When you're under stress, when you're under time, you miss stuff that's right there in black and white, and then you lose a lot of points. Okay, so Rocky writes the following conveyance: Whiteacre from Rocky to Rocky and Moana's joint tenants. All right, so this is messy, right? This is very similar to a question we did in class. We start off that Rocky and Tua own it as tenants in common. They are tenants in common. You can do that. Then they get engaged, Moana and Rocky. And Rocky writes a conveyance. Whiteacre from Rocky to Rocky and Moana's joint tenants. Now, keep in mind, Rocky only has his own interest. He can't convey more than what he already has. That's all he has. You can't give more than what you have. You're not allowed to. So he gives what he has. And basically, Rocky converts his separate interest into a joint tenancy. Right? Rocky converts his separate interest in the tenancy in common into a joint tenancy. And the 4 unities are present. It's conveyed at the same time. Rocky and Moana acquire by the same instrument. Rocky and Moana share this interest in Whiteacre, and Rocky and Moana possession of the whole. Right? Some students ask about the straw man, right? How can you convey it to yourself? At common law, can't you not do that? The straw man issue came up when you're trying to dissolve the joint tenancy. Here they're creating one. I did give credit, though. People said that you couldn't convey it to yourself. People, I remember, put that. And arguably you can't, but I think in this one, I think it would probably be okay. But now Rocky and Moana are joint tenants. And that's survivorship rights, right? But keep in mind, Rocky and Moana are joint tenants, but collectively they're tenants in common with Tua. It's messy. It's sort of hard to keep straight in your head. All right, next we learn. Sorry, these are lyrics from the song. I won't sing them. You're welcome. I see what's happening here. All right, Moana and Rocky then get married. Nothing changes. Nothing changes, right? Unless they what's called transmute the property, it retains its character from before the marriage. It does not become a joint, what they call a quasi-joint tenancy. No tenancy by the entirety either. Your community property. If there are some facts that there was like a mortgage and they commingled money, but there are no facts to tell you this. This is separate property. Okay, next they have a son named Pua, who is the pig from the cartoon. That doesn't change anything. Still separate property. Okay, then we learn that Moana allows her father Tua into their home. Keep in mind, Tua is the other tenant in common. Rocky does not approve of Tua entering the home, but it really doesn't matter because he's a tenant in common, and you can't lock out a tenant in common. Spiller v. Macrith from Alabama might be relevant. Allowing Tua into the home does not separate the unities. It would not convert to a tenancy in common. This is Schwarzwald versus Sampson, the California case with the walnut trees. All right, now we get to the last part. Rocky dies in a tragic boating accident. Rocky, in his will, leaves everything to his son, Pua. Basically writes his wife out of his will. And then Tua files suit to quiet title in Whiteacre. So you have to assess the interest in Whiteacre from Moana, Tua, and Pua. Usually, a married person cannot leave all this marital property to his son, right? He can only leave half of his community property, and the wife gets the other half. This is the 75-25 split we talked about. But again, Rocky's interest is not marital property. It was acquired before the marriage. And therefore, the right survivorship kicks in, right? You had a joint tenancy. Moana gets all of Rocky's interest, right? At that point, the joint tenancy dissolves. And then Moana and Tua are tenants in common. Poor Pua gets Zippo, gets zero. Several students heard about the elective share, but we're in a community property state. So those aren't relevant. Again, so a lot of people screwed this one up because they didn't see that they weren't married yet. And I can't help you. Reading the question is very important. All right. Question to number 4, please. Onya, go ahead.
I have a question about using percentages versus using how you describe like whole and part interest. Because I'm really bad at math, and I was scared that if I would say like, oh, he has 50% and 50%.
Yeah,
try to break it down.
You don't need to get percentages. It's not even relevant. The percentages only matter in a case where it involves selling it or partition in kind. I would not give numbers unless you have to.
Okay, perfect.
Again, I think I said that in class. The numbers really only kick in if there's a partition in kind or a sale. Okay, thanks. Yes, Derek, go ahead.
Josh, if separate, have a separate.
I'm sorry, I lost you in the middle. I think you actually said Mallory, who's the name of the character in the movie, but not in my fact pattern. It's Rocky. So try it again. I'm sorry. All right. Just give me a second. Let me just read what you wrote. Give me a second. Think about it. I think you're right. Give me 30 more seconds. I'm still thinking this through. Right. So Rocky and Tua have a tense in common, right? Moana and Tua are tense in common. Rocky and Moana have joint tenants. I think that might be right. I'm not sure if it's the best answer. That might be right. I didn't see it that way. You're right. This is how the question in the book was. But I think the way that this question is written doesn't lend itself to that. As I saw it, it was Rocky and Moana are tenants in common like this. And I'll just put in the chat, right? It's almost like they were a set, and collectively they were tenants in common with, let's just say Tua, I'm sorry. That's how I imagine it, that it wasn't they were independently in like different steps. When I wrote the question, I didn't have in mind the way Derek phrased it, but now I'm thinking about it, that's actually, I think, an alternate way of answering. That's creative. I hadn't thought about that. It's good. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood that.
It's what you did is very creative. I didn't write the question that way, but I think you could reframe it. And in that case, then Pua, the son, could inherit the tenancy in common between Rocky and Tua, because there's no survivorship right for that one. I think that could work. That's not what I had in mind, but I think I would give that credit if you spelled that out in the exam. But see, this is what I mean. I write a fact pattern, and I have 75 really smart students, and people come up with stuff I didn't see, which is always good. But I always read everything carefully. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's good. I didn't think about that, but let me give some points for that. All right, Al, go ahead.
I'm just a little bit confused as to what that would look like. So, because I understand he can't convey his joint tenancy interest to his son because of survivorship, but you're saying that he could possibly convey his tenancy in common between R and T to his son?
As Derek read the question, which I think is creative, he had both. Rocky had a joint tenancy with his wife, but also tenancy in common with Tua. He couldn't convey the joint tenancy of survivorship, but the tenancy in common would be descended through his will to his son. That's if you.
What does that interest look like? I'm just kind of confused.
It's a disaster. I don't even know what it would look like. It makes no sense. But it's like this conceptual riddle. Like, how do you have on the same piece of land both tenancy in common and joint tenancy? It's very hard to conceptualize, which is why when I wrote the question, I didn't have in mind Derek's reading, but I don't want to say his reading's wrong. His reading might be an alternate reading. My reading, I think, is a little bit easier, but his readings, I wouldn't say it's wrong. I think it's definitely plausible.
Thank you.
We have a property law listserv where a bunch of law professors argue, and there was actually a question along the lines of Alex, like, what does it even look like? What does it even mean? And the short answer is it doesn't mean anything until you try to sell it or partition it. That's when it actually matters. All right. Other questions, number 4. Okay. All right. Going once, twice. All right. Number 5 is the policy question, right? There's so much you can talk about here. This semester in particular, we had a very spirited discussion with Johnson the very first day of class. So it was a very good discussion, which we didn't have here, but that's fine. So I was thinking about them when I wrote this memo. But Johnson, right? Why is it that we should protect rights of natives or not? Why should courts perhaps treat some natives as uncivilized or not? Why should you acquire property by discovery? What does that mean? First in time, you weren't there first. There were other people there. Is it fair to simply deny the rights of native people based on some claim of a European colonializer, right, or settler? There's a million ways you could take this question. I don't even try to give a sample answer because there's no one right way. People wrote about everything. So questions at number 5, the things you want to run by me. But I think this is a very open-ended question to really let you sort of show your stuff. Yeah, Natasha, go ahead.
Would the answer be more of like how we think, like an opinion-based answer, or what we discussed? Like
Whatever you give has to be based on law. You're welcome to give your opinion saying if these cases are wrong, we have to talk about the cases, or these cases are right. But you have to tell me what the legal standards are. You can't just say, I think that colonizing is bad, right? You got to give me some law to back it up. You might think that, which is fine, because Marshall is wrong, right? Johnson was wrong, and I'm happy to agree that answer. Questions to number 5. We were just about out of time, actually. Questions at number 5. All right. Questions at anything else? Yeah, Derek, go ahead. You're funny. I don't know. You're very funny. I deliberately don't write the questions after this message is over, so I don't give it away inadvertently. I'm a terrible liar, so I have no idea. I haven't thought about the question yet.
Is it something you could just shoot us an email with?
Go away.
The next question, and that's what.
It's a fair question. I don't have a list. I've never had a student who wrote an acronym I couldn't figure out. I don't want you to write FSSD, fee simple determinal, or FSD, or FSSCS. I would rather you just say it out in words. If you're really thinking you need acronyms to get under the word count, then you're not writing your answer correctly, right? It's if you need acronyms, you're doing something wrong. The A+ answers don't use them, so I wouldn't recommend you do it. If you feel you need to, I'm not going to punish you, but I'm usually able to figure it out from context what you mean. So I don't have a list. I've never thought of making such a list. There's some courts that require you to publish a appendix with all acronyms. So the DC Circuit, the federal court in DC, says if you're using acronyms, you have to have an appendix saying what your acronyms are, which I guess makes sense in DC with the alphabet soup agencies. All right, what else? Thank you. How about I just email you the question in advance too? That'd be even easier than telling you what movie it's on, right? I'll think about it. Not. Elena, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask about the previous question about the tenancy in common. How can it be at the same time tenancy in common and joint tenancy?
It's a weird thing. It's this sort of brain riddle where at the same time 3 people are on the land with different types of relationships. It doesn't make much sense. Go back to our class on that topic, and we did one of the poll questions on that issue, and maybe see if that helps make sense. But I'll admit Derek's question is well framed. I don't really know how this. Or it was Alec. Alec's question is well framed. I don't really know how this works. It's a weird thing in property, but it has to work conceptually because you have different types of relationships with survivorship or not survivorship.
Because when I was working on that problem, the way I was thinking about it was when he was Tua and Rocky were tenants in common, but then when Rocky turned it into the joint tenants, and then he and Moana became joint tenants, and then whatever they
Correct.
had. Yeah, so that's how I was looking at it. I didn't see how they both can be tenants in common with Tua at the same time.
Yeah, no, they can. But I described it a little bit differently than Derek did. I don't think Derek's answer is wrong. I think his answer is very plausible. But you can have at the same time 2 people as joint tenants, and they're collectively or individually tenants in common with a third party. That you can do that. That's
So
what
they're
it.
collectively and individually.
Well, I said or. I thought they were collectively tenants in common. Derek said they were individually. I think you can make either case.
Okay, collectively or individually.
Yeah, you can't be both. But I thought they were collectively, and then Derek's individually. And I'm not saying Derek's wrong. I think his answer is plausible.
Yeah, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Well, yeah, whichever one works better for you. I don't. I got to think through. That wasn't what I had in mind when I wrote the question, but I would absolutely give credit for it. See, grading's hard because I think I have an answer in my head. It's like, wow, this is good. I got to now tweak my answer. It happens every year, especially in the future interest questions. Like, whoa, where'd that come from? Harrison, go ahead. And we're over time, so if we need to go, that's fine. But I think it's important for me to run out late today.
I just have one quick question. I was just thinking about this the other day. This might be super simple, but the tenancy by the entirety, if the wife is going to have a survivorship, generally now is going to have a right to survivorship and the tenancy by the entirety.
Mm-hmm.
But the elective share, so if the husband leaves the wife out of the will, that apply to common law more so because the husband cannot give his wife a share.
Well, the tenancy by the entirety kicks in automatically upon death, right? So it never even goes to probate. So with a tenancy by the entirety, the husband can't leave the wife nothing, right? She gets that entirely. The question is for other property, like a bank account, that's not by the entirety.
Okay.
Right. Again, the tenancy by the entirety is an automatic upon death. The survivorship kicks in right away. When you're thinking of the forced elective share, that's generally for like bank accounts and things that aren't real property.
Okay.
Or husband and wife can own something as tenants in common. You're allowed to do that in New York. They don't have to make a tenancy by the entirety. They can title it however they want.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. What else? Going once. Going twice. All right. Minute poll's running. If you have any last minute thoughts, please add them. Otherwise, thank you so much and best of wishes. And I wish you the best of luck for the semester. Thank you. Bye. I'll see you all in person in the fall, I promise. Come by, say hi.